Hi, this is Eric Best from Flying Tiger Motorcycles, and this is part 3 of our video series, The Whys of Motorcycle Maintenance. Today we're going to cover what you need to look for when you're going to buy a used bike from a private seller. A lot of people are kind of clueless about this, so this is just kind of a quick list of things you need to look for and be aware of when you're looking at used bikes. Right here we have a 750 Honda Magna. This is obviously a used bike that my customer just bought, and he wanted to come by for an oil change. So we're going to start at the front and work our way back. One thing you want to look at is the front tire. These front tires are by no means new, but you want to look for cupping, which is low spots in the tire, cracks in the tread area, and then any kind of damage to the tire. Also, it's a good idea to look at the wheel. Make sure there's no dents in the wheel. Sometimes when you slam into something, you'll dent a wheel, and you'd be surprised how many people don't realize that the wheels are bent. A bent wheel can also result in a damaged tire and a bent fork. Here's another example of things you need to look for: fork seals, leaky fork seals. There's a good example of a leaky fork seal. The seals leak, they'll run down onto the caliper and eventually get onto the rotor. This can contaminate the front brake pads and cause reduced braking forces. Fork seals are fairly easy to replace, but it can be a costly repair depending on the motorcycle. Look for any damage to the radiator. If the radiator has bash marks in it, or crumpled fins, or leaky around the bottom edge of it, just be aware of that kind of thing. Check the condition of the brake lines, make sure there's no visible cracking in them. If there's a little bit of cracking in it, it's not the end of the world. Just make sure that there's no leaks. There's no leaks out of the bottom of the calipers and such. Alright, moving on to the engine side of things. We'll start up here. Make sure all the cables work. Brakes work as they should. Throttle returns. Clutch works as it should. Make sure all the lights work. Try all the signals. Usually, as a general rule, if you're a newbie, never buy a bike that you cannot start. If you know what you're doing and you're an experienced bike mechanic, then you pretty much know what to look for if the bike's not running. A good example of a common problem with bikes that people tend to overlook are leaky carburetors. Here you can see we have the back carb and the front carb on this motor. It's a V45 motor, and the floats bowls are all sealed good. There's no brown staining telling me that there's a fuel leak anywhere. I'm also looking at the heads of it. This is the back head. Looking at the valve cover gasket. There's no leaking there. I'm looking at the head gasket right across here, and there's no leaking here. No visible signs of an oil leak. There's a little residue right here out of this wire. This is like a sensor here and a power wire. There's no leaking around there, or a little leaking around there, so probably not too big of a problem. If it's starting to run down the side of the engine case, you need to kind of be leery of that. Now we're going to move down. I'm going to look around the bottom edge here for oil. This looks pretty clean. There's a little bit of residue on the pan. That's pretty common. There's always something leaking out of there, so really not too big a deal. Just look for fresh drips. We just changed the oil in this one, and so we got a little bit of a drip right here because we drained some oil out of it. But actually that's not too bad, so don't worry too much about that. Moving on toward the rear, make sure the rear shocks are in decent shape. Check the underside of the mufflers, make sure that they're not rotten out. A lot of these older bikes will get rust in the bottom of them, have condensations in the muffler, and it will rot the exhaust out. Also, same as the front, check the rear tire, make sure that it's good. If you have a center stand, put it on the center stand and make sure it spins freely. Different types of braking systems will have various amounts of drag to them, so take that into consideration when you're looking at these. Drive line, shaft, chain, or belt they all have signs of wear. So check the chain. If the chain and sprocket set are worn out, you're going to have to replace that. You can use this as a negotiating tool. In this case, we have shaft drive, and it does appear to be leaking some. You have some residue right here. If you look at the bottom, you got heavy residue down here. So this thing is clearly leaking, and we don't really know where from yet. So that's definitely can be a costly fix. So be aware of it. Shaft is a really good system, and it works very well. Just be aware that it is a costly fix if it is inner seals. Moving on to this side of the motor, also same thing, look for oil leaks. Clearly we have a little bit of an oil leak here. Here you have a couple sources for oil leak. You have the shift seal where your shift shaft comes out, and you also have your counter shaft sprocket seal. In this case we have a counter shaft sprocket, but virtually the same thing. It's a driven gear that has a seal in it. So those are just some of the things that you need to look for when you're buying a used bike. Take your time. No one's setting a stopwatch on you, and if the owner is setting time on you and says they have to go somewhere, you have to hurry up. Come back another time and look at it so you can get a good close look. If it's at night, bring a flashlight, but try to always look at this stuff during the day. Alright, thanks for stopping by. I'm Eric Bass from Flying Tiger Motorcycles, and happy riding.